Hey folks, happy Friday. Dave Fuller back with you from Summit Racing Equipment along with Kerry McFarland.
Hey everybody.
Today we are, as promised, doing some buffing how-tos, polishing tips and tricks. Kerry, you're going to kind of lead the way here and show us some of the things you've learned in the shop. I know you've got tons of experience with. Tell us a little bit about your background with this.
Pretty much I've learned how to paint and buff and wet sand, block sand, all that kind of fun stuff from my dad because we build hot rods and it's cheaper to do it yourself. So we've learned how to do it, taught ourselves how to do it, and had some buddies kind of teach us some stuff. And just kind of from picking up stuff from my dad and watching him for being the helper for about 20 years and holding the compound, I've learned how to buff, and then I kind of took over a little bit. So
yeah, now you've got a lot of interesting things going on at your home place, and you've actually brought in some panels to work on here and show off some of your thoughts and your tricks. So let's I guess first of all we need to talk a little bit about, I don't want to call it equipment, but product to use. And I know we have a lot of product that we picked out for this particular video.
Yeah. So I'll kind of go over some of the stuff that we use. With this, what I'm going to show on this fender is this is already wet sanded up to 2000 grit. I'll explain that in a minute. This I'm going to show you how to wet sand on, and then this is just base right after it's painted. What we do, you start off with your wet sand papers. So we have 2000 grit. There you go. We have 2000 grit, 1000, and 1500. Obviously, you go 1000, 1500, 2000. And the finer the grit, the less difficult it's going to be to buff it out, and the shinier it's actually going to get. Now, when doing it too, you use one of these. This is called it's a blockbuster. They come in 2 packs. These are great for wet sanding and stuff, because if you wet sand with your hand, you're actually going to get fingerprints in it. You have to keep your hand completely flat so you don't get your fingerprints in it, because when you buff it, you'll actually end up seeing that in the finished paint job. So you use the block. And then as we get to it, I'll kind of show you the polishes and stuff that we're going to use as well. So as you can see, this is what the buffer's workbench usually looks like. So it's usually pretty messy. And
you mentioned this was like a base coat, clear coat, right? So
yes.
Is there what's some of the differences, or is there any?
So this is base coat, clear coat. So it's got the color and everything, and then it's got a clear over top of it. You can wet sand and buff base coat, clear coat, or single stage. Single stage is a little bit more difficult. You have to be a little bit more precise on it, because if you go through single stage, if you go through a layer of it, you either have to be really good at buffing and know how to kind of hide it, or you have to respray it. And it's the same way with this, but the clear coat's a little bit more forgiving. Actually, that's why I sanded this earlier, because wasn't sure how much clear coat we put on it. This was just a test panel for a color scheme we're doing on one of the cars at the shop. So, but you'll see it kind of come to life as we buff too. So
okay, and this is off of
this is the fender off of 56 Ford, but the color scheme is going on a Shelby Cobra.
Okay, all right. Well, let's kind of get to it.
All right, yeah. So we'll start with the first steps. So we'll start with wet sanding. What you want to do, you want to grab your 1000 grit sandpaper and you put it on the block. Kind of start a little bit overlapped. So when you're done with it, it looks about like that. This piece has already been somewhat used. So then we're going to grab your spray bottle full of water. A nice trick to this too is when you put the water in, put a little bit of Dawn dish soap or any kind of dish soap in it, because it lets it glide a little bit better. It stops it from getting stuck. If it's just water, it sometimes will get stuck on the paint, and it's not stuck, but it just glides easier with the soap. So if you look down here in the green especially, you can see kind of how there's some orange peel in it. Orange peel is, any paint job is going to have orange peel. That's why you wet sand and buff. If you look like right here, wait, stay there. So where the light's reflecting in it, or over in here, you can see how it's got the orange peel. You can see it a lot better. This side, we got all the orange peel out, and I'll show you how to do that. So, and if you guys have any questions while I'm doing this, feel free to ask away. I may be out of breath from doing it, but I'll answer what I can for you. When you're doing this, you always want to go at a kind of at an angle. So that way you can kind of do cross hatching to get it to look right. So you can see what you're doing and everything. You want to keep the block flat where you can dig in. One of the other big things about this is too, always have your paper towels handy because you got to check periodically. So this is perfect here. So if you look, you can see where I'm starting to get the orange peel out of it in here. And then if you look at this, see there's a dot there. And then it's got a shiny spot around it. That's a piece of dirt. So you need to get that dirt out. And all the striping and stuff is actually under the clear coat. So you can see where we're starting to hit paint and we're starting to hit clear coat and stuff. So you can actually get this completely smooth like we did over here. Now, if you do it by hand and not with the block, I'll show you how to do that too. Because here with it taped off, it's a lot easier for me to do it by hand. You want to grab it like this, keep your hand flat, and you want to use kind of base of your hand. So this section right here where it's fairly flat. Keep your hand fingers kind of locked out. Because if not, if you use your fingertips, you can see right where my fingertips are going. See, now you can see we got that piece of dirt's almost out. It's right there. And there's another little piece right there. And you can see how the shine's starting to go away from the stripe, the gold stripe. It's starting to get flushed. You can't even feel this brown stripe anymore, or the bronze stripe. And mind you, this is all with 1000 grit right now, because you want to knock 1000 grit's gonna knock the orange peel down a lot quicker than 1500 or 2000. And I know guys that are really crazy about this stuff. They go up to, I've seen guys go to like 8000 grit sandpaper before to make sure it looks good. But it's a lot easier to buff. But if it's a little bit more work to do it with up to 2000, but it's also a lot less time spent wet sanding. And let me tell you, the less time you can spend wet sanding, the better you are.
You were mentioning this is not one of your favorite things, but it's something that you've become good at, and it's definitely necessary. And it's one of those jobs where it's all a lot about patience.
And that's what it is. Yeah, like this is actually fairly smooth. So, it's a lot easier to wet sand because of the smoothness of it. There's a bunch of orange peel or anything in it. So now I'm just using 1500 to get the final pieces of dirt and the shiny spots out to make sure we don't go through the paint. If you look at, you want to come over here, Patrick. So if you look at this, you can see the white kind of residue coming off. That's clear coat. If you see green, gold, or brown,
that's bad.
Yeah, immediately stop, because you're going to end up having to probably re-clear it. Not that I know that from personal experience or anything.
Right, I was going to say, I'm sure you've had some hard lessons
Yes.
In the process of learning all this. And you were talking a little bit earlier too about Yeah, for this, having the color come out is bad. Maybe with the epoxy, is it enamel type finish? It's not as big a deal.
Yeah, so with this, it's not as bad. But, and you know, honestly, if you're doing an enamel paint job, like an enamel would be like single stage. So if you're doing a single stage paint job, I would still suggest clear coating it. You're going to get the best bang for the buck from clear coat. It's going to last longer. You know, it's going to look better because you're going to be able to wet sand and buff. It's going to be a lot deeper paint job. I think we covered that actually in our paint video,
initial paint video, which is actually where this topic came from. We had a lot of folks asking, you know, just about buffing and polishing, kind of finishing. And we didn't have time to cover it in that video, so we did promise we'd come back. And,
and here we are.
Yep.
The old guy, unfortunately, that's usually with me.
The other old guy?
The real old guy who's usually with me, unfortunately isn't with me today. He's working, training a new sales class. So so he couldn't make it today. So he sent me in his place. And I mean, let's be honest, though, I'm the real talent at the shop anyways. So
I'm sure he agrees.
Oh, he does. 100%. Yeah. Just kidding, Dad. So
what is a pretty common mistake you see people making at this stage of the game?
At this stage, it's kind of, you know, runs are bad. Unfortunately, we don't have any runs in this. Well, unfortunately, but very fortunate that we don't have any runs in this. But, you know, runs are always bad. That's always something that you run into. And it's a very fine line to sanding them out to get it. Because when it runs, it actually will sag the paint. So you'll see the paint actually sag here and then have your run. So you actually have to sand out the runs and then try and get the sag out without going through a layer of clear. So, and hopefully you can do that. If not, you're going to be using, you know, 400 grit, sanding it, you know, blending in that spot and going from there. So if you look here now, you can see, mind you, I'm not just doing this because the panel's hot. I'm doing this because it helps dry the water off so you can see. If you look here now, it's nice and flat. It's a nice matte finish. So I'm not going to do this whole spot because we already got this one done, and I'm sure you guys, it's about as exciting as watching paint dry, watching someone sand or wet sand it. And we got a couple cool things to get to. Well, one really cool thing at the end that I really want to try. But there you have it. That's kind of how you wet sand. That's how you can get a lot of the flaws, the orange peel, the dirt. If you get a dog, don't pet the dog, which I always get yelled at for. We'll be painting a car and we go inside during, you know, after we clear it to let it dry or flash, and we'll be out in the house and we have a dog. I mean, I'm not gonna,
dog.
Yeah, he comes over and he's like licking me and looking at me like, hey, why aren't you petting me? I get yelled at for petting the dog all the time. But luckily I know how to wet sand the dog hair out. But yeah, so now we're pretty much at the point where we can start buffing, and we'll start buffing this spot right here.
All right.
So our tools for buffing, we're going to start with number 1. It's a 3M rubbing compound. This stuff, it's one of the better ones to use because it's, you know, it's been around for years. It's called Perfected, and they've literally almost perfected it. So it works really nice. It cuts real well. So the coolest thing about this is I've learned it's one of those weird things. It's kind of cool. You're putting more scratches in it to get scratches out. So it's kind of one of those cool things where if you think about it, you're just keep scratching it and keep scratching it until there's no scratches left. You're also going to use a wool buffing pad. I believe these are Schlegel, and we actually carry all this stuff. So, but these are really good to use. And your trusty buffer. This one has been used a little bit, so we're getting rid of this pad.
Now imagine when using this, I mean, it's a feel thing, right? I mean, you're kind of just letting the weight of the
absolutely,
the tool kind of do the job.
Yeah.
Okay.
One other thing I want to show, there's a hole in the middle of this. As you can see, my finger sticking through it. And there's a hole in the middle of your buffing pad. It's so you can line it up so it doesn't wobble on you. Or at least doesn't wobble too bad. When you get a fresh pad, what I like to do is start with a little bit on the pad. Kind of knead it in so that way you don't have a lot of dry spots or anything. And obviously, if you're doing a whole car, you clean the pad. It gets rough. And none of these guys have seen me buff, so they have no idea that there's going to be just a massive amount of fuzz coming off all over their black shirts and gray shirts.
How often are you swapping the pads out on a job? Like say on a fender?
If they get too caked up, they'll eventually stop cutting as quick, and it's better to change them out. But I mean, you can wash those pads. The wool pads, you can wash them, and they'll actually kind of come back to life a little bit. So, and there's a scratch here, a little chip here. So if you notice that, don't judge me. All right, wish me luck. Smear it on so you don't throw it all over Dave and Patrick. So when you're doing this, a lot of it is speed related. Some people go faster, some people go slower. That's one of those feel things too. My dad, he likes to go slower with it. I like to run it a little faster because it gets the paint a little warmer and will get it shining quicker.
Now you ride along the edge of that pad primarily, or
it depends. A lot of the time, if you have somebody that doesn't really know what they're doing, you'll see swirl marks a lot once they get done with it, and that's because they don't really know what they're doing, and you get swirl marks. But and they run it flat primarily, so you get swirl marks. But there's a couple tricks and techniques that you kind of pick up along the way to get rid of those swirl marks and stuff. So when you're going on an edge too, like here, I'm going to go off this edge. There's like almost a 90-degree edge here. When you're going to an edge or you're going up to an edge, you want to go off the edge. So when this rotates, it rotates clockwise. So if I'm going like this, it's going to burn all the paint off right here on this edge. So it'll almost go to bare metal even. So you want to go like this and use this side of the buffer so it goes off and it'll run off the edge. And that way you won't burn it off. I mean, granted, I've done that and still burnt stuff off, but that's the way you generally want to do it. Now you're starting to be able to see some of the shine come out.
a certain pattern you like to run that in?
No.
Kind of random.
It's just kind of random. If I see, when I'm doing it, I'll randomly see a spot that, is dull and I'll go to it, or, there really is no pattern to it, at least the way I do it. So it's starting to get a little dry. A little more on. So I'll show you another little tip. I knot my cords so that way they don't come unplugged, because I just thought of this because I just stepped on it and almost unplugged it myself. So when you got buddies over at the shop and they're walking around and you're trying to buff, this way it doesn't get unplugged. Also, you don't want to let the cord hit the fender. When you're buffing also, you can see the reflection of the lights in the shop in it. I like to use them as kind of a reference of how shiny it's getting, if it's getting shiny enough or whatnot. And you can see kind of where the, if you still have sanding scratches.
So again, you're putting very little pressure on that, right? You're just kind of letting it sit.
I mean, it's basically running itself. And I know there are a lot of guys that use a lot of different buffers, but this is what I learned how to buff on, because this is what my dad's used for years and years. And I prefer the Makita ones, which we actually sell. This one's from here. But they work really well. They got a lot of speed to them. They're pretty nice buffers. I think it's actually a 7-inch grinder is what we call it, maybe. You also want to make sure the fender doesn't fall off the stand. All right. So now that we've done it with this, it's time to move on to the second stage. So that was our cutting compound. Now here's our machine polish. This is actually number 3. I skipped number 2. But this one will actually get rid of the finer scratches that the rubbing compound left in it. And with this, you want to use a foam pad. I picked out a blue one today. Usually you use a white one for this, but again, I'm using what I'm used to, so I'm using the blue one today. With this and the next polish I'm going to use, you'll actually really be able to see the shine come out. And this is one of those things, you know how you always get the saying like, man, that's so shiny you could shave in it, it's like a mirror. This is how you get that finish. Granted, this is the really quick version of explaining how you get that finish. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but this is the quick version.
It seems like you're going back and forth over the same spot more with this than another. Is that true?
It just depends. Depends where I see scratches at in it. If I see scratches, I'll go over it some more. If it looks good, I'll call it done. One of those type of things.
So what about when you're working on an area that's got maybe some obstacle, if there is, antenna or something like that? Is there any tips for that?
With that, don't hit it.
That's the big.
Yeah. So the worst thing is, like, I do a lot of show cars, I'll buff them and stuff after they're painted for people, and if they're taken to a show or whatnot. And I know, I mean, there's been some where I've literally had to like get on a ladder and go upside down and try and do it. And it's, you know, there's no real good way to do it. But when you're trying not to, you know, go onto the edge, you have to figure out a way to do it. So that's where you kind of come in and you got to figure out what's the best angle, what's the best way to get at it.
Okay.
So you kind of got to, when it comes to like antennas and stuff like that, mirrors, you kind of got to plan ahead a little bit to figure out your next move type of thing.
Got to map it out.
Yeah. So last but not least, this is our cherry wax. It's just a generic, good old cherry wax. It smells fantastic. That's the reason we use cherry. I mean, it's a banana. It's anything. But with this though, with a fresh paint job, you don't want to put any carnauba waxes or anything like that on it within 30 days, because once it's been freshly painted, the solvents aren't usually fully cured. I'll show you on the next one kind of about that, but it takes a while for that stuff to finally cure. So you want to let it expand, and the carnauba wax will seal it in. It'll actually get dull once the solvents come out. So that's why you don't use carnauba wax, because it seals all that in. You want it to actually breathe, and then within about a month, you can go back in and, you know, rebuff it or repolish it or whatnot.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Just from the outset of all this, so going kind of back from the beginning, I don't know if we ever established the amount of time between finished paint and starting on this process.
Yeah, so with that, it's about 24 hours, give or take. It's, you know, you got to, when we do it, it's about 24 hours, 24 to 48, we let it sit. I know a lot of times we'll go in and we'll start we'll sand it and start to buff it. And it literally is like, I mean, you could take this and buff the concrete and actually get a shine out of the concrete quicker than the paint, but it depends on how long it's sat, that kind of stuff. There's like a certain feel, but general rule of thumb is about 24 hours. Within 24 hours, you want to start sanding and buffing.
Okay.
Same path for the cherry wax. And this is kind of the stage where you get the swirls out. Because now when this goes out in the sun, you won't see the swirl marks, because you're getting rid of all those swirl scratches. Which is actually a good segue into my next point. When polishing, you know, Mr. Miyagi from Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. So technically you're not supposed to go in a circle. So, because if you go in a circle, you're going to leave circle scratch marks in the car, in the paint. What you want to do is, and this is why, you know, some guys take 20 minutes to polish a car, some guys take 2 hours to polish a car. You want to go in straight lines, because one of the reasons is straight polish or straight line scratches are a lot harder to see than round or circular scratches. So the cherry wax. So there you go. That's how to wet sand and buff a fresh paint job. I mean, it comes out pretty nice when you do it. There's no orange peel in it. And if you look kind of down here, if you can go down, you can see where the lights are, where it's real grainy. And then you come up here and you can see, I mean, you can see my beautiful face in it. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you can see your own face in it. So
the polishing's really a 3-stage for you. You have the 2 3Ms and then the cherry wax.
Exactly. Yeah. So we use usually we use 1 and 2 3M.
Okay.
And then we'll use the cherry wax. Now, my favorite polishes when I'm doing like my normal daily driver car that's been painted for years and stuff is I actually use McGuire's stuff. I'll use number 7 first and then number 26 Carnauba wax. Number 7, make sure you put this on in straight lines and in the shade. Because if not, number 7 is absolutely miserable to get off, but it actually covers really fine scratches and stuff. So it's really nice to use. It's a great polish to use and it works really well. But if you go in a circle and overlap, it kind of cakes up and gums up and it's a little harder to get off.
Okay.
So
on the 3M stuff, for somebody that's new, you're talking about 1, 3 on this, but you usually go 1 and 2. What's the number designation?
So the number designation is just step. So what step you use? You use step 1, step 2.
As simple as that.
Yeah, it's literally as easy as that.
Okay.
So. But yeah, so there you go. It looks pretty good to me.
Yeah.
I'm sure my dad's at home like
he's critiquing you. Yeah.
I'm sure he's like, God, he missed a piece of dirt again. Because no matter what, we'll do a full size, massive car, and he'll be like, "Oh, you missed a piece of dirt right here in the rocker or on the bottom of the fender or something." I'm like, "Thanks, pops."
Hey,
here's 15.
You got to have that element of perfectionism for this type of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Really that and patience. So.
Exactly.
Switch out body panels here. You've got a couple more over here. I know we have a couple different styles here.
Yeah. The last one's going to be the fun one.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a challenge.
It's going to be pretty cool because you'll see. Well, you'll see. So I should have tested this out earlier. The best angle. So this is a panel. This panel has literally been painted for about 15 years. It's been sitting in an attic. It's off I believe, an El Camino, one of our buddies' El Caminos. But you can see how it's got, if you come in, you can see the scratch marks. This is a perfect example of it, the solvent coming up and it breathing. You can see how it lost a lot of its shine. So I'm going to show you kind of how to do this as well, bring the shine back to it some. This could actually use wet sanded again. Whoever wet sanded this didn't do a good enough job, Terrence. Terrence is my dad.
Oh,
so of course I got to give him some crap on it.
Shop door is going to be locked when you get back.
I'm actually staying out there this weekend, so yeah, the house door is going to be locked. My dog's going to be outside.
Yep, along with all your belongings.
Yeah. All right, we're not going to do the whole thing. We'll just do a nice section here that was pretty dull. So as you can see on the back, this is going clockwise, so I'm going off the panel. There's also another trick you can use when you're doing this is you actually put a piece of tape real close to the edge of the panel, and that'll actually stop it from going through as well. Remember how I was talking about some of this stuff buffs like concrete? This is one of those pieces that buffs like concrete.
So this is a case where you're just trying to restore the shine back into something that's been out there already.
Exactly, yeah. So say you got your hot rod or your muscle car or whatnot, you got it sitting in the garage and you're getting ready to go out. Buff it, man. You can make it look 1,000 times better with a little bit of elbow grease. Nice Friday, Saturday night in the garage, and you'll see a huge difference.
Now, are you using different steps for this kind of goal, or you
This is pretty much depending on how much it's, you know, oxidized, if for lack of better words. You can use the same steps, or you can just go right to number 2 and start from there.
Okay.
And I'm sure you've probably seen me give really weird angle looks at stuff. It's because I'm using, like I said earlier, using the light to actually see what I'm able to do.
Yeah, I definitely got some different light setups in here. With,
yeah.
The studio.
I know. I might bring all our cars in here.
So again, what's causing then you to have to go back and rebuff? You mentioned sort of the solvents coming up.
Yeah, so the solvent will come up, and it's pretty much the paint. Like, well, give me a second. Oh,
all right,
show you. All right, come on in, Patrick. I'll show you. So you can see how it kind of, the paint, you can see little tiny, I don't know if you can see that on camera, but in real life you can see like real tiny little grains in it. It's actually the paint fully curing, and it shrinks up a little bit, you know? So, I mean, not enough to where you'd be like, oh my gosh, there's my $20,000 paint job and it, you know, shrunk. But it's enough to where you can, you know, you can wet sand and buff it again. This actually needs wet sand and buffed again because you can see where it kind of shrunk up a little bit. But for 15 years, I mean, this looks pretty decent. So, but yeah, it's that oxidation, that solvent releasing from the paint is just from it fully curing.
So how often do you have to do something like this to
usually once
restore a paint back to shine?
Usually once. If you take good care of it and polish it, usually only once. It, well, you know, a couple months. Usually once we paint a car a couple months down the road, we'll bring it back in and we'll actually rebuff the whole thing to make sure it stays as nice and shiny. Because usually once it's fully cured, it won't oxidize like that again unless it's out in the sun and you don't touch it for years, which we might see in a minute here. And I know I like to run faster on older paint because it helps it get warmer. Like I said earlier, with it getting hotter, it helps the paint kind of melt together.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that. How fast is too fast? I mean, you can heat it up pretty quickly with all that friction.
Yeah, for a beginner, I probably wouldn't go over like 1.5.
Okay.
For me, I'm at like on 2.
Yeah.
You know, but it's one of those things too where you just gotta learn how to do it, and that, like my dad, and where you're comfortable at. My dad doesn't like going over like 1.5, whereas I like running faster.
So where's the rest of the El Camino? Is this yours?
No, this is actually our good buddies. I don't know where it's at. I think it's in his shop. It's kind of one of those, I think it's one of those back burner projects like most of us car guys have. So that's it with number 1. Worst thing is too, you get fuzz in your nose, and that's always fun. You feel like you want to sneeze the entire time. The nice thing about this Makita machine too is it's actually got a lock on the side right here where you can pull the trigger, push that in, and it'll run for you. Then you just tap it and turn it off. So when you're doing a whole car, your hand gets pretty tired holding it. So that's a nice little bonus piece on it. But if you do use that, make sure that you don't turn it on and then put it on the paint and start buffing, because you will go through there. Again, one of those things I've learned
the hard way.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm actually surprised my dad lets me anywhere near a buffer after some of the things I've done learning how to do it. But I will say I've learned how to do all this stuff from my dad, and he's pretty talented with this stuff, and his attention to detail and, you know, being extremely anal about getting stuff perfect has rubbed off pretty good. But thank you. I know I'm one of those people, I like the creation part, so I like to make the sheet metal parts and do all that stuff. And then, you know, I don't like so much the finishing part. Now I'm starting to learn more and get more into that because I like it better now. But he was always the guy that's like, you gotta take a few more minutes and do it, you know? And once I started doing that and, you know, realized some of our stuff that we do, it really is that little extra, you know, hour, 2 hours of doing work that really can make your project, your paint job or your whatever, really stand out from the crowd. And that's like this stuff. I mean, yeah, this is, you know, tedious and time consuming, and there's a lot of room for mistake. But once you get it down and get it done right, this is the difference between, you know, going to like a Earl Scheib or whatever, Mako, and
$100 paint job.
Yeah, and having, you know, a custom paint job done.
Yeah.
And you can really tell. There is no like real, you can always tell a good paint job from a bad one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Or a cheap one.
Unfortunately, you've got to make the mistakes to learn. And I think, you know, once you go through and start applying what you've learned, like you said, it becomes more enjoyable.
Exactly. Yeah. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. You know, like I used to hate wet sanding because I just hated wet. You'll have no fingerprints by the time you're done. But now, I mean, it's kind of fun because then you get this buff it and see it come to life and really pop. Like once we actually get done with this, you'll be able to look kind of here, and I mean, I can see a clear definition line right here between these two on how much shinier and how much even bluer this is. I almost got you.
Should have ordered the second apron.
Yeah, that's right. Now I'm just using the cherry wax again. Yeah, and it's always a good idea too. Dave actually walked over there and he's holding the fender for me. It's actually usually a good idea to do it when you're doing a fender like this on a stand, to have an extra person there just in case, because there's nothing worse than when you're, you know, almost done. And, yeah, and this machine, this buffer will actually throw a fender pretty good distance.
Someone asked a question about stainless versus paint. Do you have much experience on stainless?
Stainless? Yeah, actually, it's stainless and aluminum I'm unfortunately very familiar with. I do a lot of buffing on that too because I'm building a hot rod, and I hand built an aluminum dash for it, and I did it instead of doing it the smart way, having my buddies use their big machines and their mills and that stuff. I used a 4-inch grinder and a Dremel and made a 5-gauge panel for my hot rod, and I completely polished it. So It's pretty much the same thing. Although with polishing metals, you're going to start with a heavier grit. So you're going to start with like an 80 grit maybe and go up to, 3, 4, 5,000. Because the further you go out, the less scratches and the shinier it'll be. And then you also, with that, you can use rubbing compounds. They work, but they'll still leave fine scratches in it. You're going to want to use like a jeweler's rouge. We actually have a really good, it's a performance toolkit, but it comes with 3 different types of rouges, and I think 4 or 5 different buffing wheels for like your drill. But your best bet when doing that stuff, doing stainless and stuff, is using your bench grinder and getting a 6-inch wheel for it, and use that with the rouge, and you can get a really, really nice shine out of stainless steel. So that's usually how I polish stainless steel and all that stuff, because that's usually the best way to do it, and you can get a great looking shine out of it. All right. Yeah, feel free to ask questions, guys, if you got any more. Yes, I just saw somebody wrote, did I seriously tap the rubbing compound thing on it? Yes, I did, because I'm not putting enough pressure on it to actually dent it. I'm putting, I'm just getting it out. So, I mean, there's not nearly enough pressure to dent it. And if it scratches it, I'm buffing it to scratch it or to buff it out anyway. So, but yeah, you can. I mean, to me, I don't know if you guys can see it as well through the camera, but in person, you can see a real fine definition line right here on where the difference between the paint jobs is.
Yeah, it definitely brings the texture back out.
Yeah.
On the sparkle. So
yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, that's kind of how to do just a regular paint job. And
say on a weekend, getting ready for show season or something like that.
Yep.
Bring your paint back to life a little bit.
Exactly, and you don't even need to start with like number 1 if you have a nice car that's been painted for a while. The only reason I use number 1, which is the heavy duty cutting compound, is if you can still see scratch marks from wet sanding or stuff like that. It's if you got a scratch in it, you can use 1 to actually, somewhat cover it, kind of melt it back in. But, I mean, it's I'd start with number 2 and go from there, and you're going to have a great result out of it. So
yeah, looks great.
Can we do the fun one now? Do we have time?
Yeah, we're going from this one, which is looking great, to
the blue one.
You need a hand with this one, or you got
No, I got it.
All right.
I just need a tetanus shot afterwards.
We don't have the equipment for that here, but everything else. So tell us about this panel.
So this is off of a, I actually can't remember. It's either 56 or 61 Ford pickup truck. This fender's literally been sitting in a dirt pile outside of the shop for 6 years, and then it finally moved into the garage for maybe 2 years. The only thing I've done to this is try and wipe it off with paper towel and water. And as you can see, I mean, this is a solid, nice fender, just missing about the bottom 6 inches of it. But I don't even know why we kept it. We kept it for the rolls and stuff, but it's, I've used it as a paint bench and all kinds of stuff. So
kept it to challenge you to make this thing shine a little bit.
I know, yeah. So I'm excited to try this. I mean, there's been no playing with this yet. I haven't touched it yet. I want to see if I can actually make this thing shine.
So you mentioned this is an enamel paint.
Yeah.
And you're talking, if you're looking for sort of a patinaed look, but have kind of that shine over top of it, that this is the game plan right here.
So this is like, how those guys come out of the barns with like just a complete junker, and then they get it looking, wow, that looks awesome. It's got a perfect patina. It's got a really cool look to it. This is kind of how they do that. I mean, there's a lot of other steps to it. I mean, I could wet sand this and buff it, but you know, it is what it is. It's an old fender that was in the junk pile, and
Yep.
let's see if it works. So you'll see this will turn green because it's a single stage paint job. Also, another good thing about buffing compound and stuff, if you have overspray on your car from just sitting outside or whatnot, rubbing compound will actually take it off. You can use, or buffing it will take it off.
Seeing some shine.
I actually can't believe this thing's shining up.
Let's see the pad. Yep.
Oh yeah, there's dirt, there's green on it, it's everywhere. So I don't know how good we're going to be able to get this, but with the time allotted, I mean, but you know, you put some time into it, you can make this thing look pretty. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I was going to try and wet sand it, but we don't have time.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to get the black spots because I think that's wrinkle paint overspray from me using this as a paint gun. And I'm also running the buffer way faster than you should actually run the buffer. It was blue at one time, apparently.
Look at that.
I mean, this just goes to show, too, how good the old... I mean, some of those old paints were pretty legit paint.
Right.
I know we got a 34 Chrysler that my dad and grandpa painted before I was born. And it's straight
Still
lacquer.
looking good.
And it'll look like this. And then you can go out and buff it or even polish it. And I mean, that thing will look like $1 million.
Wow. Surprise yourself.
Yeah. As you can see, the pad's pretty green now.
Same process for this too?
Yep,
It's just
exactly.
the old tried
This
and true.
one for sure,
Yeah.
yeah, because of how oxidated it is and
Mhm.
everything. I mean, you honestly don't even have to use polish on it, but the polish is kind of gonna seal it a little bit better than just rubbing compound. I don't think I've thrown any on you yet, Pappy. You got any questions?
Yeah, somebody was asking Carrie about the orange peel look. They had a car that's got some orange peel. And, they're just wondering if John helped me sing here. Just asking about correcting that and what your advice would be.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. So first off, John, I'm offended you didn't tell us what kind of cool car you have that has orange peel. But it'd be about the same. It's just all that wet sanding. It's that'll get rid of your orange peel. That's the best way to get rid of the orange peel. And it all depends on how many coats of clear as well. I mean, if it's real bad orange peel, you'd have to start with 1,000. I don't know if I would do it without knowing how much clear is on the car. So if it was something that I didn't paint, I would maybe start with 1,500 and then go to 2,000. That way it's a lot less of a chance to go through a lot quicker. With 1,000, I mean, you can literally buff through or sand through with 1,000 real quick. And you don't want to do that, especially on your nice new paint job. So I would maybe try somewhere where you can't see really with 1,500, a small area, and see how it turns out that way. That's the best way to do it, though. That'll get rid of your orange peel and make it look pretty nice.
And then just kind of follow on that process earlier in the
buffing and everything. Yeah. Okay, I actually can't believe that this shined up like that. I was kind of, I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of expecting it to shine up, but I wasn't quite expecting that. Wow. I mean, the car we took this off of didn't even look that shiny. So you can kind of.
Yeah, it's like you said,
Insane.
you go out and find something, a barn find type of thing, or something that's been sitting out. You don't want to get to driving it, but you want it to look a little nicer. You can. Yeah. There's hope for it.
Exactly, and a lot of the thing is too, where I mean, don't go out and try this on your car right away. If you look, I kind of knew that this would shine up, but I didn't know that it would shine up quite as well as it did. You can see here how you can see it's kind of oxidized, but there's still a pretty good layer of paint on it. This kind of told me that, okay, there's still some pretty decent paint on it. It's enamel. We can, get this kind of to shine up. And then you can see it's hard to explain, but you can kind of tell there's still some shine in there. If there's still some shine, it should be good to go. And you can see where we buffed it over here. It actually took some of the texture from the original paint out of it and kind of smoothed it out from heating it up. And it buffs up your rust spots, and it makes it look kind of cool,
Yeah, I like that look.
Yeah, so do I.
Sort of weathered, but you've got the shine to it.
Exactly.
But we're kind of right up against our time. But a couple wrap up items. First of all, somebody asked if we carry paint here. Of course, we do. We have single and two-stage from Summit. We carry that. We carry all this. We have the paint and body section on our website that you can go to and find all these products. As far as just care for the buffing pads and things, just regular soap and water. Or
care for the buffing pads, you can actually, there's a, I think chemical guys, they make a really nice thing. It's a 5-gallon bucket with a little grit pad on the bottom where you can take your pad out, put it in there in water and just kind of turn it and get the dirt out of it. Or if it gets like this, like we just did that one, if you take a screwdriver, put your buffer on the ground, take a screwdriver, or they make like a spur type pad cleaner. You can actually take a screwdriver and go in and out, and it'll get all this dirt out of there, and it'll add a little bit more life to your pad, because you can see from it going in one direction, it's only getting
just the one side. Yep.
Yeah, the one side. I mean, you can spread it apart, and it's like brand new. So it'll get a lot of that dirt and that old paint and everything out.
Okay. I'll put you on the spot before we go. 3 mistakes you'd see newer people to this type of project making and are common and to avoid. I know you talked a little bit about Mr. Miyagi and that.
Yeah,
so.
I mean that's one. That's that's definitely one. But because that drives me nuts. It's one of those things where if you can see, when you're inside or under at the gas station underneath the fluorescent lights that are on the underneath the gas station canopy, you can see those swirl scratches, and it drives me nuts. I buffed my one newer car. I buffed like 17 times trying to get them out, and I can't get them out. But that's one of them.
And I know that's the one that's you get back and forth on.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of companies say do a circular motion, but my personal preference is to go straight lines because it's a lot harder to see those scratches and stuff. And all this stuff is my personal preference. Like it's like painting or pinstriping or whatever. You can ask 20 guys, you'll get 50 different answers from 20 guys on the same thing, or girls. But it's just kind of your personal preference, what you've grown up. Like I've grown up doing it this way, so I know how to do it this way extremely well. So, that's how I do it. But what was the question again? This tangent.
Yeah, no. It's just some common, pitfalls that somebody's just doing this for the first few times. I know you said that you learned a lot just by making a few mistakes here and there and applying them. So.
Yeah, and one of the most common mistakes is especially if you're wet sanding, and this isn't like regular car care sanding and buffing and stuff. This is like for the a little bit more advanced guy. But wet sanding, you're going to go through. I mean, no matter what. I mean, I've done this for years. My dad's done this for years, and my dad won't admit it. He'll somehow get me to sand that spot, and I'll have gone through, but I'll still go through in certain spots. But there's certain ways you can kind of blend it or make it work where you don't see it. It's just taking your time. A lot of it is just taking your time, and
that's much of it is. Even on the front side with the body work, that's all that laying that foundation. It's just so much patience.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I mean, 99% of a paint job is the body work and the wet sand and buff. I mean, the paint, there's some great painters out there that can lay down a heck of a paint job, but a lot of it is that beginning part to get it straight, and then the final part to get it flawless, to get the dirt out, to get the orange peel out, to get everything out. I guess the third biggest mistake, if you're buffing, you're going to go through. I have a 78 Volare station wagon out there that I burn through all the time, but I'm planning on repainting it anyways. So I burn through it when I'm buffing it to shine it up. Yeah. But, you're going to burn through it somewhere on an edge, and just always go away from the edges.
Yep. Question from Christopher. He's getting in here on the tail end about factory paint scratch repair. Any recommendations?
Yeah. Best thing for scratch repair, depending as long as it's in the paint still, if you can still see color in it, you can use like number 1 or a compound. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to use 3M number 1. That's my preference. That stuff's fairly expensive, but it's just my preference because I know how it works. There's a bunch of other ones. I know we make one, Chemical Guys makes one that's pretty good. But you're going to want to use that. And you want to go faster, so it heats up the paint, and it'll kind of it'll close the gap with the paint and make it kind of heat up and melt. Yeah, for lack of better terms, melt together. Because all this stuff is, like we said in our other video, all this stuff is still chemicals. I mean, it's still active type chemicals, So it just depends on how you work it. But you would want to go with a regular compound, and then I would use like number 7 and then 26 over top of it to make sure it seals in and really blends nice and well and gets rid of those compound scratches.
All right. Well, looks like we have one more question. Troy asks, what if you're about to buff out your race trailer that is gel coated, or if you're trying to buff out your race trailer?
With that, I've never honestly buffed gel coat. But I've heard you can actually, it's like pouring enamel in before you put the glass and stuff on. But I think, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure you can still wet sand and buff that too. I know you can buff it. It's pretty much the same process, scratching it to get less scratches. So I mean that's pretty much the same thing as far as I know. Now don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the answer. I'll tell you what, Troy, I'll find out and I'll respond to your question on the feed to make sure you get the right answer.
I was going to say it might also be a good quick hitter, a couple paragraph article that we can put on allcylinders.com as well. I don't think we've covered anything like that before. So, well, with that, Carrie, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, no
thanks
problem.
for showing us all this. Thanks for dragging all this stuff in. Yeah. And it was fun watching some of this stuff come back to life.
Yeah, that Valare station wagon was pretty well packed.
I bet.
So, yeah.
Well, that's it for this week, everybody. We hope you have a great weekend, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, guys.